Welcome, thank you for joining us today. My name is Brian Trendler. I co-own a company here in Mill Creek called LAF Tech. It stands for Learn About Funny Techniques, but today we're going to be focused on some important matters. I'm here with Mayor Brian Holtzclaw and Mayor Pro Tem Stephanie Vignal, and we're going to be talking about what's happening here in Mill Creek. Okay, so we're going to jump right into it. I understand the city has plans to build a multi-purpose facility on the acreage just north of the Mill Creek Sports Park, known as the DRCC. So first off, can you explain what DRCC means and give us an idea of what the city is considering?
Well, Brian, the DRCC stands for the Dobson, Remillard, Cook Church properties. They're the properties the city has acquired over the last 15 years or so. And we're just beginning the process to figure out what it is we want to do with that. In 2020, we hired a consultant to help us begin that process, to figure out what we want to do with it. That involves some community engagement, doing some survey work to hear what the public might want to do with the property. And we've identified some overall goals for what we might want to accomplish. Some of those goals are having a use that serves the broadest range of interests within the city, has the broadest number of both users and types of activities. We haven't decided on the types of uses that we might actually do. We've identified some potential uses. It could be sports fields, could be a performing arts facility, some community space, gymnasium. But we just authorized the execution of a contract last week to start a 16-month master planning process. It'll be a much more detailed process that will hopefully bring us to the end goal of identifying a particular specific use, and that process is going to involve a lot of community input.
This property and this facility gives us an opportunity to continue the process and get out with the community for further engagement as we go along, but to have one area where we can actually fulfill these needs that many different demographics are telling us that they would like to see in our city.
Thank you, Stephanie. So as a follow-up, Brian, I'd like to ask you, can residents get involved and provide their input on what they'd like to see done with this acreage?
Yes, they absolutely will be able to. Part of the contract we just signed, the scope of work is to identify a public engagement plan so we can make sure as we're going through this process over the next 16 months that we're getting that public input to guide our decision on what we ultimately decide to do with the property. I think the council is pretty united that we want to end up at the end of this process with a plan for something that will be a community asset and that can also be an economic driver within our community and bring activity into the city of Mill Creek.
Stephanie, I've heard that the city has already received more than $5 million in funds from the American Rescue Plan Act, also called ARPA. And this is really exciting. So can you tell me how the city plans to utilize this new resource?
The city has been engaged in a planning process with the council to identify areas of need within the city and to come up with a plan with overarching themes for what we can do to help our community with these funds. And some of those include beautification, making sure everything is looking nicer, as well as making sure we're taking care of some of the needs that the city has.
That's great. So, are there any examples that you can share, either of you, in regard to how the funds have already been used?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, part of the beautification, for instance, is not just making it look good now, but making sure it looks good in the future. And so we just approved the city authorizing spending almost $500,000 on a new street sweeper to help keep our streets cleaned and help clean up after storm events, because we know that keeping the streets clean is a big priority for our residents.
I know this city conducted a performance survey recently, and the results were presented at a council meeting. How does the city plan to address one of the top comments, the feedback by way of the survey, that asked for an increased police presence here in Mill Creek?
That was a big topic of discussion at our retreat, where we identified our 2023 priorities as well as our 5-year goals looking farther down the road. And one of our priorities for 2023 is increasing the police presence in the city. How that happens is the job of the city manager and the police chief to implement and figure out how to do on the ground, but it's certainly one of the priorities we've identified for this year and going forward.
All right, I've noticed in certain areas in Mill Creek that need better maintenance, particularly overgrown medians, things of that nature. What is the city doing right now to revitalize these and other areas of the city?
I'm very excited to say that this is part of how we are going to spend some of our ARPA funds as they come in, and this is one of the reasons why we have invested in a brand new street sweeper. That's going to take care of some of the leaves and debris that's in the streets to help make that look nicer and crisp. And we're also working on a revitalization plan for the medians to make sure that they start to look nicer and more crisp as well.
Excellent. Brian, do you have a comment?
Well, this is not just a short-term goal. This is a long-term goal. We just don't want to put lipstick on the pig. We want Mill Creek looking good over the long term. And so this is one of the goals for the next 5 years that we've set. So we need to focus on it both in the short term and in the long term.
I understand the City Council can be quite involved in the legislative process. Can you share anything about currently the Mill Creek's involvement?
This is the first year that we've had a legislative agenda. So the council put together our agenda for 2023 on what we would like to see from our legislators and let them know what's important to our residents here in Mill Creek. We are the link between the community and what desires and wishes they have, and our legislators in Olympia, who can seem far away sometimes. Oftentimes, the things that they're doing in Olympia directly impact our community and directly impact how things are run here at City Hall. And they need to know how that affects us. So we've made sure that we've reached out to them. We've had multiple discussions with them, and we've also worked really hard to get some funds to bring into Mill Creek for some of our projects that we have need of.
So Brian, would you care to respond as well as sharing any other examples you might have?
Yeah, absolutely. I can point to 3 examples. One, people may not realize that the library is owned by the city of Mill Creek. So we don't run the library, but we're the property owner. And we worked with our delegation to get funding to do some much needed improvements to the library. We talked earlier about the DRCC property and the planning that we're doing. We're doing that with almost $200,000 in state funding that we got through working with our delegation. And we're working with the state delegation now to get additional funding both for DRCC, but also to make improvements to the City Hall North building right next door to where we are today.
As with many cities, I understand Mill Creek staffing levels dropped significantly during the pandemic. But I have to say, there's a new energy out there. It feels like things are happening. Things are moving in a new and ultimately positive direction. Can you share a little bit about where the city stands now, and are things looking up?
Brian, things are looking up. It's hard to believe it's been almost 3 years since the pandemic started, how time flies. But after the pandemic hit, we really didn't know which way the world was heading, and we had to make some tough decisions as a city. And in retrospect, we may have tightened the belt a little bit too much, but we had to do that as responsible stewards of the taxpayers' dollars.
You're right. There is a new energy down here at City Hall. We have new leadership, and since we've gotten that new leadership, you can just feel the collaboration when you walk in the door. We have a team in place right now that works well together, and they enjoy working together, and it really shows, and that makes a huge difference in the things that we do for our community.
That's great. Well, again, I think the energy is there. I think a lot of us are feeling it, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing how that's now implemented throughout the city. So thank you very much for your enthusiastic responses, both of you. All right, Stephanie, let's carry that enthusiasm one step further and talk about the South County Fire, okay? Let's talk about some of the new resources that have now been brought to our city.
The collaboration with South County Fire is a very exciting one for our community. South County Fire has a few programs that not all fire departments or fire authorities have. For instance, they have a special community paramedic that will come around and help seniors so they can stay in their homes longer. So they'll come around if they are calling in lots of times to 911 just because they realize their medication is in need, and help hook them up with a doctor or a pharmacist and take care of themselves. So it's a very special program, and they go around and train around the country. Also, they have special CPR training that they do online. That's a condensed version so that we can make sure that we have more people in our community that know how to perform CPR. And one of the things that they do is they have blood on board so that they can save lives before they actually get to the hospital, and they're already seeing lives saved from this special program.
That's remarkable. I'm also hearing something that's music to my ears, because their efforts free up 911 dispatch to do their job, especially if it's not a life-threatening situation, right? So
Absolutely.
it's a phenomenal use of the new resource.
Absolutely. It's a great program.
Excellent. Okay, so the not fun part of my job here today is to ask you both kind of a tough question. It's not something you probably want to hear, but it's something that people want answers for. So it's important that I address this. Can you tell me why our property taxes have gone up so much in 1 year? Some say as much as roughly 39%. Is it because of the fire annexation, or how can you answer this question?
That's a part of it, Brian. Property taxes, frankly, are really confusing for the public and for the council to understand. Sure. We have posted on our website some information to help the public understand where their tax dollars go and why they've gone up. The fire annexation was one of the 2 votes that the public made when they decided that they wanted to increase taxes. So the voters in April, by 75% majority, approved the annexation into South County. That was part of the increase in property taxes that we're seeing this year. The biggest driver, though, was the Everett School District. They ran a capital levy and a operation and maintenance levy, which also the voters approved. So the increase in taxes wasn't the result of anything Stephanie or I or the rest of our council did. It was the decisions the public made for what they desired in terms of fire services and for school facilities.
One of the other reasons why the property tax went up is because the valuation of our houses went up over the past year as well, and that has a big role in how much we're paying for property taxes. And I think it's very important that we make sure that we let all our seniors know that there are resources available for them, because we realize that they are on a fixed income and they are having a hard time making ends meet. So we do have resources available on our website so that they can go to those and find out what they need.
Stephanie, those are some great points, but I think it's also important to remember in terms of the valuations, when those valuations are done are dictated by state law, and how they're done is done by the assessor. So that's something that's really outside of our control as a city.
Okay, you two, we're going to wrap it up. And I want to end on a happy note, on a fun note. And I want to give you both an opportunity to just kind of give us an idea about why you do what you do. Why are you so passionate about your roles? And maybe even what a favorite thing is that you've been involved in. So, Stephanie, can I have you answer first?
You know, I moved here to raise my daughter here. And one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about what I do is because I get to play a role in making sure the city stays the place that we wanted to move and retains all those values and all the amenities that brought us here in the first place. And one of my favorite things to do, and my daughter's favorite thing to do, is to work on our parks. And so I know Cora loves it when we cut ribbons for a new park. It's one of her favorite things to do. And you know, we get to have a role in what type of parks we have, what type of trails we have for our residents. And so that's really important to me, that we're able to get out there and talk to everyone and see what's important to them and keep working towards making this community a place where they want to continue to live and grow.
Outstanding. Stephanie, thank you for sharing. Brian?
And that's a great question. I don't know if residents are aware, the city turns 40 this year. I'm a little bit older than the city, but I do share a birthday with the city. And I moved here 20 years ago. And when I moved here, the town center was just coming out of the ground. I think that the market was being constructed. And I've watched it grow up. But that plan for town center was hatched many years before that, in the late 80s and early 90s, when the elected officials of our city were looking to the future of what they wanted the city to be 10, 20 years down the road. I think we're at a similar point with our city today, with the DRCC property we've talked about a bunch, but also with the sub-area to the south of town center. We have a lot of opportunity to determine how we want Mill Creek to look 10, 20, 30 years from now. And I'm just excited to be able to be a part of that and help shape that vision for what our city might become down the road.
Again, I want to thank you both for taking the time today. I appreciate your willingness to answer these questions, the soft pitches, one or two hard ones, and of course, the nice one at the end there. Thank you so much for taking your time.
Thank you,
Thank you, Brian.